storm arrived with the fury of divine judgment, lashing against the ancient stones of Ravenscroft Manor as though seeking penance for sins long buried. Lightning illuminated the towering Gothic spires, casting grotesque shadows across the moor, while thunder rolled through the valleys like cannon fire, a sound that made Sebastian Ravenscroft's jaw tighten involuntarily. From his study window, the Duke of Ashbourne watched the tempest with the detached fascination of a man who had witnessed far worse storms, both natural and human. When the carriage appeared through the driving rain, its lanterns flickering like dying stars, Sebastian felt an inexplicable stirring in his chest. The vehicle struggled against the wind, wheels cutting deep furrows in the muddy drive before finally drawing to a halt before the manor's imposing entrance. A woman emerged, cloaked, mysterious, moving with a grace that seemed to defy the chaos surrounding her. "Miss Grey, I presume," he murmured to the darkness, though something in her bearing whispered of secrets that ran deeper than assumed names. She paused at the threshold, her face obscured by shadow and hood, yet even from his distant perch Sebastian felt the weight of her gaze as it swept across the manor's facade. When their eyes met through the rain-streaked glass, a moment suspended between lightning flash and thunder's roar, something ancient and undeniable sparked between them, a recognition that transcended reason. Sebastian retreated from the window as though burned, his reflection fracturing across the glass like his carefully constructed composure. The study enveloped him in familiar shadows, leather-bound volumes that spoke of duty, mahogany surfaces that gleamed with the weight of responsibility, and always the portrait above the mantelpiece that haunted his sleepless nights. Margaret. Sweet, innocent Margaret, who had died bringing forth his heir that never drew breath. The physician's words still echoed in the chambers of his memory. "Sometimes, Your Grace, the heart simply cannot bear the strain." But Sebastian knew better. He was the strain, the curse that transformed love into tragedy, hope into devastation. What use is love to a man who buries all he touches? The words fell into the silence like stones into a well, disappearing into depths he dared not fathom. Thomas appeared in the doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. The old steward had served 3 generations of Ravenscrofts, and his loyalty ran deeper than bloodlines. "The new governess has arrived, Your Grace. She appears quite refined." They all appear refined, until circumstance reveals their true nature. Sebastian's fingers traced the rim of his brandy glass, the crystal singing a melancholy note. "See that she is settled appropriately. The children will meet her tomorrow. Forgive me, Your Grace, but perhaps it is time." "Time for what, Thomas?" "To rejoin a society that whispers of my cursed touch. To subject another innocent to the darkness that follows in my wake." Sebastian's laugh held no humor. "I am a duke, not a man. Titles require no hearts." Thomas's silence spoke volumes, his eyes holding the gentle reproach of one who had witnessed too much sorrow. "The children ask for their uncle daily. Young Charlotte speaks of loneliness, and Master Henry grows wild without proper guidance. Perhaps this Miss Grey might bring light where shadows have lingered too long." As if summoned by their conversation, the storm's fury intensified, rattling the ancient windows. Sebastian contemplated the irony, a governess arriving in tempest, like some harbinger of change. He was neither prepared for nor desired. Lady Evelina Harcourt, though she must never think that name again, stood in the modest chamber assigned to the governess, her trembling fingers working to remove the sodden cloak that had been her shield against more than mere rain. The looking glass reflected a stranger, hair darkened by moisture, cheeks pale with exhaustion, eyes that held depths of experience no mere governess should possess. 6 months ago she had been Lady Evelina, daughter of Viscount Harcourt, with prospects and position. 6 months ago she had believed in love, in honor, in the fundamental goodness of gentlemen who spoke of devotion beneath moonlit terraces. "Forgive me, my darling Evelina, but circumstances have altered." Lord Pemberton's words still cut like glass through her memories. "Your father's debts, the scandal. Surely you understand a man in my position cannot. The word that had shattered her world, revealed the hollow nature of promises whispered in alcoves, exposed the cruel mathematics of society, where love yielded to ledgers. Her mother's voice echoed from their final conversation. "The Harcourt does not bow to circumstance, dearest. We find another way. Then I shall rise above it, Mama, even if hidden behind another name." Evelina had lifted her chin with inherited pride, though her heart bled with each word. "Miss Grey shall provide where Lady Evelina cannot. The children of this house will receive an education worthy of their station, and we shall survive with dignity and tact." The deception tasted bitter as medicine, yet necessity had taught her to swallow far worse. She was no longer the naive girl who had believed in fairy tales. She was a woman who understood that survival sometimes required abandoning everything one had been to become what circumstances demanded. Thunder crashed overhead, and Evelina pressed her palms against the window, watching lightning illuminate the grounds. Somewhere in this vast manor lived the Duke of Ashbourne, a man whose reputation preceded him like winter wind. Cold, they said, remote, haunted by tragedy and suspicious of all who sought to breach his carefully constructed solitude. Perfect, she thought grimly. A man who expected nothing would discover nothing. Miss Grey would tend his niece and nephew with competent anonymity, earn her modest wage, and disappear into the safety of invisibility. Yet as she unpacked her meager belongings, her fingers found the locket she could never abandon, her grandmother's locket bearing the Harcourt crest. Some things, she realized, were impossible to leave behind, no matter how deeply one buried the truth. Morning arrived with reluctant grace, storm clouds retreating to reveal grounds transformed by rainfall into gleaming splendor. Evelina made her way to the nursery, her steps measured and purposeful, every inch the proper governess in her modest gray dress and severely pinned hair. Yet beneath the careful disguise, her heart hammered with anxiety. Charlotte and Henry Ravenscroft proved to be delightful children. She aged 9 with her mother's golden curls and precocious intelligence. He aged 7 with serious dark eyes that seemed far too old for his years. Within moments they had accepted Miss Grey with the easy affection of children starved for attention. "Uncle Sebastian never smiles anymore," Charlotte confided, as they settled around the lesson table. "Aunt Beatrice says he has forgotten how." "Perhaps," Evelina suggested gently. "He simply needs reminding that joy exists." It was then that footsteps echoed in the corridor, measured, authoritative, approaching with the inevitability of judgment. The door opened, and Evelina's carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble. The Duke of Ashbourne commanded attention without effort. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the bearing of a man accustomed to absolute authority, he possessed the dark handsomeness that poets celebrated and mothers warned their daughters against. His eyes, deep blue as midnight storms, swept the room with calculating precision before settling upon her with uncomfortable intensity. "Your Grace." She rose, executed a perfect curtsy that spoke of breeding she prayed he would not recognize. "I am Miss Grey." Indeed, his voice carried the cultured tones of privilege. Yet underneath ran currents of something deeper, pain perhaps, or simply the weariness of a man who had ceased expecting joy from life. "A governess must know her place, Miss Grey. I trust you understand the importance of boundary." The words stung, though she had expected such reception. "I assure you, Your Grace, I know my place better than most." Something flickered in his expression, surprise perhaps, at her quiet dignity. His gaze lingered on her face with troubling intensity, as though searching for something just beyond recognition. When his attention dropped to the modest locket at her throat, her one weakness, her one retained connection to identity, Evelina felt her pulse quicken with alarm. "The children's education will proceed according to established curriculum," he continued, though his voice had lost some of its edge. "Latin, French, mathematics, proper deportment. Nothing unconventional. Of course, Your Grace. Though I believe education should also nurture curiosity and independent thought." Independent thought? A ghost of humor touched his lips. How refreshingly optimistic. Charlotte tugged at his coat sleeve. "Uncle Sebastian, Miss Grey knows ever so many stories. She promised to teach us about ancient Rome." For a moment the Duke's stern mask slipped, revealing gentleness that transformed his entire countenance. Did she indeed? "And what does Miss Grey know of ancient Rome?" Evelina met his challenge steadily. "Enough to bring Caesar's victories to life, Your Grace and Cicero's oratory to inspire young minds toward excellence." The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken questions and dangerous possibilities. Finally, Sebastian nodded curtly and withdrew, but not before casting one last, searching glance at her locket, a look that sent ice through Evelina's veins. She was playing with fire, she knew. But sometimes, survival demanded risking the flames. Days settled into careful routine, each one a delicate dance between duty and deception. Evelina threw herself into the children's education with passionate dedication, finding solace in their eager minds and innocent affection. Charlotte proved remarkably quick with languages, while Henry displayed an unexpected aptitude for mathematics that delighted his governess. Yet always, she remained aware of the Duke's presence, his footsteps in corridors, his shadow passing library windows, his occasional appearances that left her pulse racing with dangerous awareness. Sebastian Ravenscroft was not a man easily ignored, despite his attempts at emotional isolation. It was during a history lesson that she first sensed his observation. Speaking of the Battle of Hastings, she had become animated, her natural enthusiasm breaking through governess propriety as she described William's tactical brilliance. Only when Charlotte giggled did Evelina realize her audience had expanded. Sebastian stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable yet somehow less forbidding than usual. "Pray continue, Miss Grey. Your account of Norman's strategy is illuminating." Heat flooded her cheeks. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I fear I become rather spirited when discussing history." Spirited. He tested the word as though it were foreign to his vocabulary. How unusual in a governess. Knowledge should ignite passion, should it not? How else can we inspire learning? Something shifted in his gaze. Interest, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit buried beneath layers of careful control. Indeed, though passion can prove dangerous when improperly directed, the words hung between them, laden with meaning that had nothing to do with education. Evelina felt her breath catch, awareness crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. "Children," Sebastian said suddenly, his voice rougher than before, "you may take your refreshment in the garden. Miss Grey and I require discussion regarding your curriculum." Alone, the nursery seemed smaller, intimate in ways that made Evelina's skin prickle with awareness. Sebastian moved to the window, his profile stark against the afternoon light. "You speak as one educated beyond typical governess expectations," he observed quietly. "Your accent, your knowledge, your bearing suggest refinement uncommon in your profession." Panic fluttered in her chest. "I was fortunate in my education, Your Grace. My previous employer valued learning." "Previous employer?" He turned, pinning her with that unsettling stare. "And yet you provide no references." "Sometimes," she said carefully, "circumstances require discretion." "Ah, discretion." His smile held no warmth. "What circumstances might require a genteel young woman to abandon her past so completely, Miss Grey?" The question struck too close to truth. Evelina lifted her chin, drawing upon reserves of pride that no catastrophe could entirely diminish. "Perhaps the same circumstances that might cause a duke to retreat from society, Your Grace. We all carry burdens we prefer to bear in solitude." The silence that followed crackled with tension. Then unexpectedly Sebastian laughed, a sound rusty with disuse, but genuine nonetheless. "Touché, Miss Grey. It seems my niece and nephew have acquired a governess with both learning and spirit. I pray they prove worthy of such exceptional instruction." As he departed, Evelina sank into her chair, hands trembling with reaction. She was walking a razor's edge, and with each encounter the blade grew sharper. This is the perfect place for our natural subscribe call to action. The rose garden had become Evelina's sanctuary, a place where Miss Grey could momentarily fade, allowing Lady Evelina to breathe beneath star-scattered skies. She had not expected to find Sebastian there, standing among the white roses, like some brooding hero from Gothic romance, his dark hair touched with silver in the moonlight. Before we continue with this tale of forbidden love and hidden identities, dear listeners, I hope you're as captivated as I am by the growing connection between our mysterious governess and the haunted duke. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe for more historical romance adventures, because trust me, what happens next between Sebastian and Evelina will leave you breathless. He looked up at her approach, surprise flickering across his features. "Miss Grey, I had not expected, that is, the garden is rarely visited at this hour. Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace. I often find evening air conducive to reflection." She moved to retreat, but his voice stopped her. "Stay." The word emerged rough, almost pleading. "I mean, the garden is large enough for two troubled souls seeking solitude." Troubled souls. The phrase hung between them, an admission more revealing than any formal confession. Evelina found herself drawn forward despite every instinct screaming caution. "The roses are magnificent," she observed, touching a pale bloom. "They bloom despite the thorns. Perhaps the thorns remind us that beauty demands a price." His voice carried weight of personal knowledge. Everything lovely in this world requires blood for its creation. The cynicism in his tone sparked something fierce in her chest. "Surely you cannot believe that, Your Grace? Must beauty always be born of suffering?" He studied her face in the moonlight, his expression unguarded for perhaps the first time since her arrival. "Experience has taught me that whatever I touch withers, Miss Grey. Love becomes loss. Hope transforms to heartbreak. Perhaps it is better to admire beauty from distance, to appreciate the roses without grasping them. And yet," she said softly, stepping closer despite every rational thought, "roses left ungathered eventually fade regardless. Perhaps the risk of thorns is worth the brief joy of the bloom." "You speak as one who has known both thorns and blossoms." His hand lifted, almost touching her cheek before falling away. "What heartbreak taught you such philosophy, Miss Grey?" The question pierced her carefully maintained armor. For one dangerous moment, she wanted nothing more than to confess everything. Her name, her fall, her desperate masquerade. Instead, she drew upon the strength that had carried her through devastation. We all carry scars, Your Grace. The question is whether we allow them to prevent us from living. Living, he laughed, the sound holding more pain than humor. I had forgotten the distinction between living and merely existing. Perhaps, she whispered, it is not too late to remember. The space between them had somehow diminished until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the flecks of gold in his storm-dark eyes. Desire, dangerous, impossible desire, sparked between them like lightning seeking earth. Miss Grey, her name emerged as prayer, as warning, as desperate plea. Your Grace. She swayed toward him, drawn by forces beyond reason or propriety. Thunder rolled in the distance, breaking the spell. Sebastian stepped back abruptly, his mask of ducal reserve slamming back into place. The hour grows late. You should return to your chambers. Of course. Humiliation flooded her cheeks. Forgive my impropriety. But as she hurried toward the manor, she heard his voice, soft as summer wind. There is nothing to forgive, Miss Grey. The fault was entirely mine. The announcement of Lord Pemberton's masquerade ball struck Ravenscroft Manor like a lightning bolt. Charlotte clapped her hands with delight while Henry wrinkled his nose in disdain. But Evelina felt the world tilt dangerously on its axis. Uncle Sebastian says we may attend for 1 hour, Charlotte announced breathlessly. Miss Grey, you simply must come as our chaperone. I hardly think a governess belongs at Lord Pemberton's ball, Evelina managed, her voice steadier than her racing heart. Nonsense, declared Miss Beatrice. Sebastian's sharp-tongued aunt, who had arrived that morning with trunks and opinions in equal measure. The children require supervision, and surely even a governess owns suitable attire for such occasions. Evelina's mind reeled. Lord Pemberton, her former betrothed, the man who had abandoned her when scandal touched the Harcourt name. To appear in his ballroom, even masked, seemed like tempting fate beyond reason. Yet Charlotte's pleading eyes proved impossible to resist. Please, Miss Grey, we shall be ever so good, and you look quite elegant when you're not trying to appear so governess-like, Henry supplied helpfully. That evening, Evelina stood before her mirror in borrowed finery, a deep blue gown that Clara, her personal maid, had mysteriously procured. The dress transformed her from mousy Miss Grey into something approaching her former self, though the simple mask would hopefully preserve her anonymity. The ballroom blazed with candlelight and jewels, society's finest displaying their peacock splendor while musicians wove melodies that spoke of romance and possibility. Evelina kept to the shadows, watching Charlotte and Henry navigate their first formal social gathering with endearing mixture of excitement and nervousness. She was observing their dancing lesson when strong fingers touched her elbow. The lady appears to be without a partner. The voice was deep, cultured, hauntingly familiar yet distorted by his elaborate mask. Evelina turned to find herself facing a tall gentleman whose bearing screamed aristocracy, whose dark hair caught candlelight like captured starfire. I am merely chaperoning, sir. Dancing would be inappropriate. Tonight, all usual rules dissolve into masquerade's magic. He extended his hand with commanding grace. One dance cannot compromise a lady's reputation when her identity remains mystery. Before she could protest, Evelina found herself swept onto the dance floor, her body responding to his lead with treacherous recognition. He moved with fluid power, guiding her through the waltz with expertise that spoke of countless ballrooms, countless partners. Yet something in his touch felt familiar, dangerous, absolutely right. You dance beautifully, he murmured, his breath warm against her ear, like one born to ballrooms rather than other occupations. Heat flooded her cheeks. Did he recognize her? Was her disguise so transparent? You flatter me, sir. I speak only truth. There is something about you, your grace, your bearing, that suggests mysteries waiting to be unraveled. The music swelled around them, and Evelina allowed herself this one moment of stolen joy. In his arms she could almost believe herself Lady Evelina again, could almost forget the deception that governed her days. Perhaps, she whispered, some mysteries are best left unsolved. And perhaps, he countered, spinning her with dizzying skill, the greatest treasures are found only by those brave enough to seek truth beneath surface appearances. As the final notes faded, they stood breathless, still caught in the spell of the dance. His mask had shifted slightly, revealing a tantalizing glimpse of familiar jawline, and Evelina's heart nearly stopped. Sebastian? The name escaped before she could prevent it. His grip on her waist tightened. How did you? But Charlotte's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Miss Grey, Uncle Sebastian, we've been looking everywhere. The spell shattered. Sebastian's eyes widened with recognition and something approaching shock. But before he could speak, Evelina had melted back into the crowd, leaving him standing alone on the dance floor. staring after her with dawning realization. Rain lashed against the manor's windows with renewed fury, as though the very heavens sought to mirror the tempest raging in Sebastian's chest. He paced his study like a caged wolf, the memory of the waltz burning through his consciousness with relentless intensity. Miss Grey, his enigmatic governess, transformed into ethereal beauty beneath masquerade's magic. The woman who had haunted his thoughts for weeks had proven herself capable of even more dangerous enchantment, when freed from the constraints of her assumed position. But it was more than beauty that tormented him. During their dance he had glimpsed something that defied explanation, a familiarity that went beyond their brief acquaintance, a recognition that whispered of deeper mysteries. The way she had said his name, the shock in her voice when she realized his identity, suggested secrets that ran far deeper than a governess's modest deception. A knock interrupted his brooding. Thomas entered without ceremony, his weathered face creased with concern. "Your Grace appears troubled." Miss Grey attended Pemberton's ball. The words emerged more harshly than Sebastian intended. She danced, quite skillfully for a governess. Thomas's eyebrows rose. "Indeed? How unexpected." "There is something about her, Thomas, something that doesn't align with her claimed background. Her education, her deportment, even the way she moves. Everything suggests refinement far beyond her supposed station. And this troubles you because—" Sebastian whirled to face his old friend. "Because I find myself drawn to her. Against all reason, all propriety. I am attracted to a woman who may be perpetrating elaborate deception under my own roof." "Or," Thomas suggested carefully, "perhaps you are attracted to a woman whose circumstances have forced her to conceal her true nature. Not all deceptions spring from malicious intent, Your Grace. You think she is hiding something?" "I think," Thomas replied diplomatically, "that many people carry burdens they prefer to bear privately. The question is whether such burdens disqualify them from happiness." Before Sebastian could respond, commotion erupted in the corridor. Charlotte's voice, high with distress, echoed through the manor. "Miss Grey, Uncle Sebastian, come quickly. I found the children huddled in the nursery." Charlotte weeping while Henry stood pale and shaking. "There was lightning," Henry explained with forced bravery. "It struck the old oak and Charlotte was frightened." "Where is Miss Grey?" Sebastian demanded. "She went to check the damage," Charlotte sobbed. "But that was ever so long ago, and the rain is dreadful." Without hesitation, Sebastian strode into the storm, Thomas close behind. They found Evelina in the garden, soaked to the skin, struggling to secure a fallen branch that threatened the rose beds. Her hair hung in dark ropes around her shoulders, her modest dress plastered to her figure, yet she worked with determined grace that stole Sebastian's breath. "Miss Grey," he reached her in 3 strides, catching her arm as she swayed with exhaustion. "What the devil are you doing?" "The roses," she gasped, rain streaming down her face. "The branch would have destroyed them. You risked your safety for flowers. Beauty should be protected when possible," she replied, her eyes meeting his with fierce conviction, "even if the cost seems foolish to others." In that moment, drenched and defiant, she was magnificent. Sebastian felt something crack inside his chest. Some wall he had built against hope, against the possibility of feeling anything beyond duty and resignation. Without thought, he swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the manor while she protested weakly about propriety and appearances. But as they reached the entrance, her struggles ceased and she relaxed against his chest with a sigh that sounded suspiciously like surrender. "You are impossible," he murmured against her hair. "As are you, Your Grace," she whispered back. Recovery from her garden adventure required Evelina to remain in her chambers for 2 days, tended by Clara and fussed over by the children. Sebastian sent his personal physician to ensure no lasting harm, along with flowers from the very roses she had protected, a gesture that left her breathless with dangerous joy. When she finally returned to her duties, she found the manor buzzing with unprecedented activity. Miss Beatrice held court in the morning room, surrounded by correspondents and wearing an expression of grim satisfaction. "Ah, Miss Grey," the older woman declared without preamble. "How fortunate that you have recovered. His Grace requires discussion regarding the children's social education." Evelina found Sebastian in his study standing before the window with hands clasped behind his back. The morning light revealed the strong lines of his profile, the aristocratic bearing that had been bred into his bones across generations of privilege. "You wish to see me, Your Grace?" He turned, and she was struck anew by the intensity of his gaze. "Miss Beatrice believes the children would benefit from exposure to suitable society. She has arranged for several families to visit Ravenscroft, ostensibly to renew old friendships." "That sounds beneficial for Charlotte and Henry's development. Does it?" His smile held no warmth. "Or does it sound like my aunt's latest attempt to thrust eligible young ladies into my path?" hoping one might succeed where others have failed. Understanding dawned with uncomfortable clarity. She wishes to see you married. She wishes to see the ducal line secured. My personal preferences are irrelevant to such calculations. He moved closer, his voice dropping to dangerous softness. Tell me, Miss Grey, what are your thoughts on marriage? Do you believe it necessary for happiness? The question struck her like a physical blow. How could she answer honestly without revealing the wounds that still bled from Pemberton's betrayal? I believe, she said carefully, that marriage should be built upon mutual respect and affection. Arrangements made purely for convenience rarely yield contentment, and yet convenience often proves more reliable than affection. Emotions fade, Miss Grey. Duty endures. How terribly sad, she whispered, to believe that love is merely temporary inconvenience. Something flickered in his expression, pain perhaps, or longing quickly suppressed. Experience has taught me that whatever I love dies, Miss Grey. Perhaps it is kinder to all concerned if I content myself with duty alone. Before she could respond, footsteps announced Miss Beatrice's arrival, accompanied by a flutter of feminine voices. Sebastian, dear, our guests have arrived. Come meet Lady Pemberton and her charming daughters. The blood drained from Evelina's face. Lady Pemberton, Lord Pemberton's mother, a woman who would recognize Lady Evelina Harcourt instantly despite any disguise. Panic clawed at her throat as elegant figures swept into the study, Miss Beatrice performing introductions with obvious satisfaction. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton curtsied with practiced grace. How delightful to renew our acquaintance. May I present my daughters, Miss Catherine and Miss Elizabeth Pemberton. The young ladies simpered appropriately, their calculating gazes, assessing Sebastian's worth with mercenary precision. But Lady Pemberton's attention had shifted to Evelina, her eyes narrowing with the sharp focus of a woman who forgot few faces. And this is Miss Grey, the children's governess. Miss Beatrice supplied dismissively. Competent enough, though rather unremarkable. Evelina kept her gaze downcast, praying that submission might preserve her anonymity. But she felt Lady Pemberton's scrutiny like physical touch, searching, questioning, dangerously close to recognition. Grey, the older woman mused. How curious. You remind me of, but no. Surely it cannot be. The resemblance is quite striking, however. Governesses often share similar appearances, Sebastian interjected smoothly. Education tends to produce certain uniformity. His intervention saved her. But Evelina knew her time was running short. How long before someone connected Miss Grey to the fallen Lady Evelina? How long before her carefully constructed world collapsed entirely? That evening brought unexpected summons to Sebastian's private library, a sanctuary lined with leather-bound volumes and warmed by crackling fire. Evelina found him standing before his wife's portrait, his expression haunted with memories she could never share. You sent for me, Your Grace. He gestured to the painting without turning. Margaret, my wife, she died bringing forth our child, a son who lived barely an hour. I'm so sorry. The words felt inadequate, yet genuine sympathy colored her voice. Are you, or do you merely offer expected condolences to your employer? He faced her then, his eyes holding depths of pain that made her heart ache. You see, Miss Grey, I have noticed something troubling about you. Fear coiled in her stomach. Your Grace, you speak as one familiar with loss, with betrayal, with the particular pain that comes from discovering that those we trust are capable of devastating deception. He moved closer, each step deliberate as stalking predator. You comfort my niece and nephew with the skill of one accustomed to providing solace. You navigate social situations with instinctive grace that suggests extensive experience. I have been fortunate in my education. No. The word cracked like whip. You have been trained from birth for a life you no longer possess. The question that torments me, Miss Grey, is why? Evelina lifted her chin, drawing upon reserves of pride that no catastrophe had entirely destroyed. Perhaps some questions are better left unasked, Your Grace, and perhaps some truths are too dangerous to remain hidden. His hand moved to her throat, fingers tracing the delicate chain of her locket with touch that burned like brand. This bears a crest, Miss Grey. I glimpsed it at Pemberton's ball, saw it again during our dance. Tell me what noble family claims such a device. The world tilted. He knew. Somehow. Impossibly, he had pieced together fragments of truth that she had tried so desperately to conceal. I don't know what you mean. Don't. His thumb pressed against the hollow of her throat, feeling her rapid pulse. Do not insult us both with further deception. You are no governess, are you, Miss Grey? Or should I say, Lady Evelina? The name hung between them like drawn blade. Evelina felt the walls of her carefully constructed world crumbling, leaving her exposed and defenseless. How long have you known? She whispered. I suspected from the beginning. Your bearing, your accent, your unconscious assumptions about privilege and position, all spoke of nobility, but it was the locket that provided confirmation. The Harcourt crest is not easily forgotten, particularly when one has seen it displayed at countless social gatherings. Shame flooded her cheeks. Then you know everything. My father's debts, our family's disgrace, my reduced circumstances. I know enough. His voice gentled unexpectedly. What I do not understand is why you felt deception necessary. Why not simply request employment honestly? Because, she said bitterly, honest requests require references, background inquiries, social connections I no longer possess. Because Lady Evelina Harcourt is a scandal-tainted liability, while Miss Grey is merely competent anonymity. And what of Lord Pemberton? I assume his presence at the ball was not coincidental. The question reopened wounds she had thought healed. Lord Pemberton was once my betrothed. Until my father's debts became public knowledge, until association with the Harcourt name became social poison, understanding dawned in Sebastian's expression. He abandoned you. He chose preservation of his reputation over honor of his promises. Can you blame him? What man wishes to tie himself to disgrace? A man of honor, Sebastian said quietly, stands by his commitments regardless of external circumstances. Honor is a luxury afforded only to those with secure positions. Your Grace, some of us must choose between survival and sentiment. The silence stretched between them, charged with unspoken recriminations and dangerous possibilities. Finally, Sebastian stepped back, his mask of ducal reserve sliding into place. You will pack your belongings tonight. The carriage will be arranged for morning. The dismissal hit her like physical blow. She had expected it, prepared for it, yet the reality proved far more devastating than anticipation. Of course, Your Grace. I understand completely. Do you? His laugh held no humor. I doubt that very much, Lady Evelina. Dawn crept across Ravenscroft Manor like reluctant witness to heartbreak. Evelina folded her few possessions with mechanical precision, each garment a reminder of the life she must abandon once again. Charlotte and Henry had wept at news of her departure, their innocent confusion a knife twist in her already bleeding heart. The carriage waited in the courtyard, patient as death, while Thomas supervised the loading of her modest trunk. She had written letters to her mother, explaining the failure of her desperate plan, to the children, promising she would never forget their sweetness. To Sebastian, words that would never be sent but needed writing nonetheless. Miss Grey? Clara appeared in the doorway, her weathered face creased with sympathy. His Grace requests your presence in the library before departure. Evelina's heart hammered against her ribs. What further humiliation awaited? What additional punishment for her deception? She found Sebastian standing before the windows, his profile etched with exhaustion as though he had passed the night in sleepless contemplation. Morning light revealed new lines around his eyes, fresh shadows that spoke of internal struggle. Your Grace. He turned slowly, and she was startled by the raw pain in his expression. Before you leave, I feel compelled to. He stopped, running hands through his dark hair in gesture of frustration. Bloody hell, this is more difficult than anticipated. Your Grace. I owe you apology, Lady Evelina. My behavior last evening was unconscionable. You sought honest employment to support your family, and I responded with suspicion and cruelty rather than understanding. The unexpected words stole her breath. You had every right to dismiss me for deception. I had no right to judge you for choices born of desperation. His voice roughened with emotion. I, of all people, should understand the measures necessity demands. I have made my own compromises with honor when survival required it. Then why? Because I am a coward. The admission emerged like confession ripped from unwilling lips. Because you terrify me in ways I thought impossible. Because when I look at you, I see possibility I dare not embrace. Evelina stared at him, understanding dawning like sunrise after endless night. Sebastian, I have told myself that isolation is safety, that emotional distance prevents further tragedy. But these past weeks, watching you with Charlotte and Henry, seeing your kindness and strength, I have begun to question whether survival without joy constitutes living at all. He moved closer, his eyes burning with intensity that made her knees weak. You asked once if it was too late to remember the distinction between existing and living. Standing here now, facing your departure, I realize the answer terrifies me. What are you saying? I am saying. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. I am saying that I would rather risk heartbreak with you than face certain emptiness without you. But I have nothing to offer, she whispered. No dowry, no family connections, nothing but scandal and reduced circumstances. You have everything that matters. His lips brushed her forehead with reverence that stole her breath. You have courage, intelligence, compassion, and a heart brave enough to love despite betrayal. You have given my niece and nephew joy they had lost, brought laughter back to halls that had known only duty. Sebastian, his name emerged as prayer, as plea, as desperate hope she had not dared acknowledge. Marry me, Evelina. Not because duty demands it, not because society expects it, but because I cannot imagine drawing another breath in a world that does not contain your light. The proposal hung between them like miracle, too precious to touch, lest it dissolve into cruel fantasy. You cannot mean it. Your position, your responsibility, mean nothing without someone to share them. His mouth found hers, soft and desperate, and infinitely tender. I love you, Lady Evelina Harcourt. I love your strength, your pride, your determination to protect those you cherish. I love the way you challenge me, the way you see hope, where I see only shadow. And I love you, she whispered against his lips. The words emerging like long-held secret finally released. I have loved you since that first night in the garden, when you spoke of thorns and beauty and the prices we pay for both. 6 months later, spring transformed Ravenscroft Manor into Eden reborn. Cherry blossoms drifted like snow across emerald lawns while roses climbed ancient walls in glorious profusion. The gardens that had once symbolized Sebastian's isolation now bloomed with life, love, and the laughter of children who had discovered joy once more. Evelina, now the Duchess of Ashbourne, walked the familiar paths with her husband's hand warm in hers, watching Charlotte chase butterflies while Henry attempted to catalog every specimen with scientific precision. The boy's scholarly enthusiasm delighted his new aunt, while Charlotte's romantic nature found perfect audience in a woman who understood the power of fairy tales made real. Do you ever regret it? Sebastian asked softly, his voice carrying undertones of vulnerability that still surprised her. The choice you made? The life you accept? She turned to study his beloved face. No longer haunted, no longer closed against possibility. How can I regret the decision that brought me everything I never dared hope for? Even though society whispers of my cursed touch, even though some still speak of scandal regarding your past, especially then. She lifted their joined hands, pressing kisses to his knuckles. Let them whisper. We know the truth, that love requires courage, that happiness demands risk, that the most beautiful roses bloom despite the thorns. Charlotte's delighted shriek drew their attention as she discovered a family of rabbits near the fountain. Henry abandoned his scientific pursuits to join her wonder, both children glowing with the security of being cherished. They are healing, Sebastian observed, wonder coloring his voice. As are we all. Healing, Evelina agreed, and learning that broken things can become more beautiful when mended with love. As if summoned by their contentment, Thomas approached across the lawn, his weathered face creased with satisfaction that spoke of duties well fulfilled. In his arms he carried a bundle wrapped in finest linen. Their son, born just 3 weeks prior with his father's dark hair and his mother's determination. His young lordship grows restless, Your Grace, Thomas announced with gentle humor. I believe he wishes to inspect his domain. Sebastian accepted his heir with reverence that never failed to move Evelina's heart. The baby stirred, opening eyes that promised to match his father's stormy intensity, and Sebastian's expression transformed with wonder that remained fresh despite weeks of practice. Welcome to spring at Ravenscroft, my son, he murmured, pressing gentle kisses to the infant's brow. Here you will learn that beauty blooms eternal, that love conquers fear, and that even the most broken hearts can heal when tended with patient devotion. Evelina leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching their children born and chosen explore the gardens that had witnessed their own journey from deception to truth, from isolation to connection, from despair to joy beyond imagining. The manor that had once echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter. The Duke, who had believed himself cursed, had discovered that love's touch brought not destruction, but restoration. And the Governess, who had hidden behind false names, had learned that true identity could never be concealed from hearts that recognized their match. As sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, the new Duke of Ashbourne drew his wife closer. Their son nestled between them while Charlotte and Henry planned tomorrow's adventures with infectious enthusiasm. What began in disguise, Evelina whispered, echoing words from their wedding vows, became truth no mask conceal. Love, Sebastian agreed, his voice rich with contentment that would have been impossible to imagine mere months before, steadfast and eternal. And in the gardens of Ravenscroft Manor, where roses bloomed, despite thorns, and hope flourished, despite shadow, their story continued, not as ending, but as glorious beginning of all the springs yet to come.